Everyone knows most RGB software sucks more than a hot turd between your toes, but I recently discovered something truly horrific that makes these janky crap apps way worse than you could ever imagine. And this time around, guys, we can't just add more RGB to make it better. So stick around. I'll tell you all about my grave discovery and how you can prevent it from royally f***ing you in the mother f***ing ass. We don't have to bleep out ass, right? We can leave that in. We can leave that in. I'd like the ass to stay. Is there a limit on how much ass we can have? Okay, just unlimited ass. Boundless, infinite ass. Sweet. Before we continue, this video is brought to you by Keeps, the leading brand in hair loss prevention for men. Just like the next time you'll disappoint a girl in bed, 2/3 of the male population experiencing hair loss by age 35 isn't a matter of if, but when. Fortunately, Keeps offers the best solution for saving as much of your hair as possible. I can't help you with the other thing. Since your life is already embarrassing enough, Keeps lets you meet with a doctor online for utmost discretion, and you can have products delivered right to your doorstep since there are plenty of reasons to not leave the house. Keeps also offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products on the market, so they're safe, cheap, and actually effective. Since it can take up to 6 months to see results, now is the best time to start taking care of your thinning hair. Just go to keeps.com/bitwit or click the description link to receive 50% off your first order. Give your hair the chance steam machines never had, and try Keeps today. Now, right off the bat, the way I stumbled upon this issue was while trying to fix my friend Nick's gaming and streaming PC, which features a Ryzen 3700X, NZXT N7B550 motherboard, 32 gigs of Corsair DDR4 memory, and a GB RTX 3060. For several weeks straight, Nick's system was crashing so much, he named it Cyberpunk. Whether he was gaming, streaming, web browsing, or idling, the B-SODs were rampant and confusing. Together, he and I counted 9 different error codes that left our heads scratching. Normally, the fact that I had built the system myself would be the root of the issue, but not this time. After several hours of unsuccessful troubleshooting, I decided to check if any suspicious apps were installed and discovered one such app named Patriot Viper M.2 SSD RGB. Peculiar, because I had only installed a single Corsair MP600 core when I built the system, and no other drives had been installed ever since. In fact, no Patriot components had ever made their way into his rig. And yet, there was a Patriot folder on his system which contained a few strange DLL files. After he confirmed that he had no clue how the app got there, I simply uninstalled it, and just like that, his PC was fixed. No crashing, no B-SODs. Just ones and zeros, bumpin' uglies, and harmony. Perplexed as to how the app got there in the first place, we found several users online experiencing the same confusion, with many of them plagued by instability woes from the same app. Countless Redditors pointed the finger at RGB software like Asus Aura and Gigabyte RGB Fusion, claiming that upon installation of these apps, the Patriot app gets automatically and silently installed in the process. Some even reported that other non-Patriot apps had come secretly bundled with their software. Sure enough, I had installed Gigabyte RGB Fusion on Nick's PC for his Gigabyte graphics card when I first built the system. It goes without saying that while most of these apps are lousy bundles of code, they're massively popular apps supporting thousands of PC components and have been installed on millions of systems worldwide. It's also worth noting that there doesn't seem to be a commonality between the hardware specs of those affected, making the issue significantly harder to troubleshoot. On a side note, I also found that the Patriot app does not get uninstalled upon uninstalling the software it came bundled with. So even if you suspected an app like RGB Fusion to be the culprit of your crashing and removed it, the Patriot app could still cause issues with other RGB software on your system unbeknownst to you. Increasingly curious, I booted up one of my PCs that I consider to be somewhat expendable and installed the latest versions of 7 widely used RGB softwares to see which of them would Trojan horse the shit out of my rig. Out of the bunch, the only 2 bad actors, as far as I could tell, were Gigabyte RGB Fusion and ASRock Polychrome Sync. While I didn't experience any instability during the brief period I had the apps installed on my test system, both of them left a stain in the form of the Patriot perpetrator. But wait, despite my findings, several users reported other RGB software installing unwanted apps too, indicating that while current versions of these softwares may be clean, some of their older versions may not be, meaning literally anyone with any RGB software on their system could be at risk. I don't make profound statements like this very often, but this whole thing is a cluster. People's PCs are crashing round the clock because of RGB software, and no one seems to know about it except a handful of pissed off Redditors. I mean, just look at this guy. He's one expletive away from shitting the brick his PC turned into. And now I've personally witnessed the grief this is causing people through Nick. He does music live streams for his followers every day, and the first time his PC started having issues, he crashed during a live stream half a dozen times and was forced to start streaming on his ancient MacBook Pro for the next few weeks, critically disrupting his workflow and compromising the quality of his broadcasts. Being unqualified to explain this whole disaster myself, I reached out to the manufacturers who make some of the most widely used RGB softwares to find out what this insidious app is for and why it's causing systems to crash in spectacular fashion. Most companies responded to my questions with useful information they agreed to let me share in this video, albeit at the request to be kept anonymous. So with that said, here's what they had to say. To paraphrase brand number one, it's not uncommon for RGB software to be bundled with other RGB apps, and that they're often preloaded onto pre-built desktops as well. Companies do this because it's a quick fix for adding RGB support for another company's devices, since it's easier than building all the supporting code in-house. While even a single RGB app can cause problems if it interfaces with the motherboard BIOS incorrectly, this is especially common when multiple RGB apps are installed and trying to access the same layers of control at the same time. The way many RGB apps work is by accessing the motherboard's firmware or BIOS directly, and if the app is built securely, it'll reject any other apps at the door, almost like a digital bouncer. If two apps try to tap into the BIOS simultaneously, their security protocols can get triggered by the other and crash the system. Now, the brand could not confirm if this is exactly what's happening with Nick's PC, but they did say it's a very common problem with RGB apps that mimics behavior similar to what we're seeing here. They also mentioned that patches, software, and BIOS updates can easily cause instability from RGB apps that were previously working properly, which could explain why Nick's PC is just now experiencing issues. Brand number two provided some info about the Patriot app itself, claiming it's an outdated add-on that some manufacturers package with their own RGB software to add support for older Patriot drives that are now discontinued, which falls right in line with brand number one's statement. Since then, Patriot has released their Viper RGB version 1.1 software for their current RGB drives. There is a disclaimer on their site that advises not to install the Viper app with other RGB software to avoid the apps working improperly, but it mentions nothing about crashing or instability, which downplays the seriousness of the disclaimer tremendously. They also fail to urge users of their old app to uninstall it to prevent a royal storm of technical issues. Brand number two attempted to replicate the crashing issue me and many others were experiencing, but were unsuccessful. However, they did confirm that they've seen similar behavior when an app is poorly built and/or can no longer function properly. Brand number three didn't say much, apart from echoing brand number one and two that the decision to bundle the Patriot app is likely a quick and dirty solution for adding more device support. They did confirm that RGB Fusion works at the BIOS level, which, as brand one stated, is where multiple RGB apps can easily lock each other out and cause a crash. The other brands I reached out to did not request anonymity in the event a video on this matter be made. Razer pled the fifth and declined to comment about the issue since it has nothing to do with our products. It would have been nice to hear their insight on this, but they are within their rights to stay silent and have no obligations to explain themselves, as they don't include third-party RGB apps with their Chroma RGB software. Asus was cooperative with me and claimed they were actually able to replicate the crashing issue with the Patriot app, but their HQ was painfully slow to share their findings or send any usable information. After over 2 weeks of waiting for a concrete response, I made the judgment call to put out this video with the info I currently had in the interest of informing the public of this matter as quickly as possible. If Asus does pull through with a statement, it's likely that I'll do a follow-up video that highlights their findings, which should be interesting since as of now, they're the only company that's been able to reproduce the crashing behavior associated with the Patriot app. ASRock, on the other hand, made unsuccessful attempts at replicating the issue. They appeared completely stumped by the matter and seemed more focused on shifting the blame to other manufacturers, claiming they had passed the information on to Patriot and suggested I question the motherboard brand. Ironically, Nick's motherboard is an NZXT N7B550, which is essentially an NZXT branded ASRock board. And yes, ASRock knew the full specs of the system from the start of our conversation, so given the fact that their motherboard is in question here and that they're one of the two companies whose RGB software includes the Patriot app, It's extremely disappointing that ASRock failed to conduct any deeper investigation or take any sort of accountability here. Next, I reached out to Gigabyte, the company whose software led me down this rabbit hole in the first place. They claimed the issue was caused from using RGB fusion for the Gigabyte RTX 3060 in Nick's PC, and that instead, the GPU is intended to be paired with Aorus Engine. Odd, since Aorus Engine is Gigabyte's app suite, which includes RGB fusion. So what's the difference? Why is one crashing and the other isn't? As I discovered, Aorus Engine does not automatically install the Patriot app, but the standalone RGB fusion app does. Why is this? Does Aorus Engine omit the Patriot app because Gigabyte realized it's causing problems or that it's for an outdated device? And if so, why does RGB Fusion itself still include it? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any answers because Gigabyte ghosted me. I tried to follow up with them multiple times, but all of my emails went unanswered. It's been a couple of weeks since then, and I have not received a reply from them in any form. It's Gigabyte's app that's at the center of this whole mess. So their sudden silence comes across as sketchy and highly sus, to say the least. If they eventually do respond, that will certainly be addressed in the follow-up video. Now, when I built Nick's PC, I did notice that the Gigabyte page for his GPU does point users to Aorus Engine. But I don't need to explain why someone would rather use the standalone RGB app instead of a software suite that eats more system resources and includes a bunch of features you're never going to use. So I find Gigabyte's direction to just use Aorus Engine to be an unacceptable answer, especially when they're offering standalone downloads of RGB Fusion on their website. It seems to me that the best way to rectify this issue is for Gigabyte to simply remove the Patriot app from RGB Fusion. If they still want to support users who have discontinued Patriot drives in their systems, they can offer the Patriot app separately with a huge disclaimer that it's known to cause instability and should be removed immediately should users experience any issues. But honestly, it's probably in everyone's best interest to just kill off the Patriot app altogether. Finally, I reached out to Patriot. They initially seemed helpful, stating they'd have the team look into the issue and report back, but they never reported back. I gave them well over a week to respond before following up, then another week went by without any response whatsoever. Both their and Gigabyte's evasiveness is highly concerning and sparks doubt that they have any interest in rectifying the issue as of now. When it comes to the legality of bundling one company's apps with your own, brand number one claimed that legally, brands have to disclose that their software is packaged with someone else's, and that it's usually either baked into the fine print or the terms of use. Brand number three confirmed that this language is typically found within the clauses of a company's TOS. While Gigabyte and ASRock do disclose the use of third-party software in their EULA and terms of use, the language is vague, and of course, makes no mention that the third-party apps they use are known to cause crashes. It's unclear whether these companies were aware of this issue before I brought it to their attention, but they know now, and as such have a responsibility to warn users of the risks associated with using their RGB software containing the Patriot app. It's been about 3 weeks since I informed Gigabyte and ASRock of this issue, and it appears neither brand has made any efforts to address this to their users or remove the Patriot app from their software. I sincerely hope this video prompts them to take action and do what's best for the PC community at large. At the end of the day, the call to action for end users like you should be fairly obvious at this point, but I'll spell it out for good measure. Check your list of installed apps. If you see the Patriot Viper RGB SSD app and you're not using it for a supported drive, or if you didn't manually install it yourself, uninstall it immediately. Also check for any other suspicious RGB apps that might have made their way onto your PC without your knowledge. And remember, just because it's not terrorizing your system now, doesn't mean it won't cause issues later. I am very curious how many of you watching have been affected by this in some way, whether or not you were aware of the reason behind it. But if you have any experiences you'd like to share, please leave them down below in the comments. It could even help us narrow down why some systems with the Patriot app are crashing and why others aren't. But that's all I have for now. Subscribe for the potential follow-up video in the event Gigabyte, Asus, or Patriot decide to respond in the coming weeks. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.